Suppose you are building an e-commerce website where you will have a lot of data. The question is, where you will even store all of that data? Well, if you're not living under a rock, you already know that data is typically stored in a database. Now, to interact with a database, you would usually need to learn something called a DBMS or Database Management System. A DBMS is a software that helps you to communicate with a database. But the problem is, DBMSs can be complex and tricky to learn. If you've been through a university courses on a database, you probably know exactly what I mean. But what if I told you that you could use JavaScript and TypeScript to communicate with your database? I know, right? You will love it. That's exactly what Prisma allows us to do. So Prisma provides an API that lets you interact with your database using JavaScript and TypeScript, abstracting away the complexity of traditional DBMSs. So this means you don't have to dive deep into complex database management tools or SQL queries. Prisma simplifies the database operation, making it easier for developer to manage data without getting bogged down by intricate database systems. Now let's talk about the benefits of Prisma. Prisma lets you work with databases without needing to write SQL manually. It helps avoid errors by ensuring the code matches the database structure. It makes changing your database schema easy and safe over time. Prisma uses the latest tech to make database interaction smooth and efficient. It's beginner friendly and does not require complex setup. Prisma is designed to run fast and scale well for larger projects. It automatically generates the code you need for your database queries. Prisma keeps evolving, ensuring it's ready for the future tech changes. Now let's talk about the Prisma tools which we are going to be covering in this course. So the first one we have is a Prisma client, then we have a Prisma migrate, and finally we have a Prisma Studio. So Prisma client is a tool that helps you interact with your database in a simple and efficient way. It's like a helper for your app that allows you to easily read from and write to your database without having to write a complex SQL queries. On the other hand, we have a Prisma Migrate, which is also a tool used to manage changes in your database schema in an easy and organized way. It helps developers create, apply, and track changes to their structure of their database, like adding or removing tables or columns over time. And finally, we have a Prisma Studio, and Prisma Studio is a visual tool that helps developers work in their database. It allows you to see, edit, and manage the data stored in your database through an easy-to-use interface without needing to write a complex code like a SQL code. Now, if you want to install Prisma, so we have to first of all initialize our project by using npm init-y. So it's going to answer all of the questions and it's going to initialize our project. Next up, we have to install TypeScript and also TS Node, and also their type declaration file by using npm i TypeScript TS Node, add types node, and then we are going to be installing the as a dev dependency. We also have to initialize our TypeScript, so we are going to be using npx tsc --init, so it's going to initialize our TypeScript project. Then we have to install Prisma by using npm i Prisma, and we are going to be installing the as a dev dependency. So I'm going to just write like -d, so it's going to install the as a dev dependency. Next up, we have to tell Prisma that we want to use a specific kind of database. So in this case, I'm going to specify SQLite, but you are more than welcome to choose like PostgreSQL or MongoDB. That's totally up to you. Once you successfully install Prisma, it's going to give you a Prisma folder, and inside there we have our schema.prisma file. If I expand there, here you can see we would have a few lines of code, and now let me just break them down one by one. So first of all, it's going to give us the client generator, and inside there we have our provider, which is now equal to Prisma client.js. So what does all of that code even mean? So this code tells Prisma to generate a client that allow you to interact with your database using JavaScript. Next up, we have our data source and then DB, and inside there we have our provider, and which is now equal to SQLite. And also we have our URL, which is now equal to environment variable and then database URL. So this code sets up the connection to a SQLite database, specifying the provider as a SQLite and using the environment variable, which is a database URL, to securely store and access the database URL. Before you get worried about this code, you don't even have to worry about that. So that was just the definition of this code, but you don't have to worry about that. So now let's talk about the Prisma model. So I want you to imagine that you are working with some kind of a movies website where you are going to be working with a lot of movies. So for now, we will not take care of all of the movies. We will only take care of one movie. So now let me just grab this Venom movie. And now the question is, how in the world we are going to be modeling this movie? So to model this movie, we already know that this movie will have some kind of a title, so which will be a string. We also know that this movie will also have some kind of a description, which will tell the users that what this movie is all about, so which will be also a string. This movie will also have some kind of a genre, like whether this movie is action movie, comedy movie, or suspense movie, or something like that, so which will be also a string. We will also store the releasing date of this movie, like when this movie was released, and we are going to be also providing the ratings, like how many rating this movie got, so which will be a floating point number, because we are going to be adding like 4.3, 3.4, or something like that. Other than that, we can also specify a different ID for our movie, like we can have a lot of movies inside our database, so we can specify a unique identifier for a movie. So in this case, we are going to be adding an ID which will be an integer, and now we are going to be adding a default value, like whenever somebody add a new movie to the database, so we want to increment the ID by 1. So like let's suppose if you want to add some other movie, so the ID of that movie will be 2 and 3 and so on and so forth. Now we can also specify a property like when this movie was added to our database by using the created add property, and we can also specify updated add, like when we update something in the movie, so we can also keep track of that by using the updated add. So now that we successfully added to our model, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to tell Prisma that we made these changes. So to tell Prisma, we are going to be using this command which is called npx prisma migrate dev -- name and then init. So it's going to initialize there, and it's going to tell Prisma that we've made these changes. Now the migration is successfully done. The next thing that I want to do is that I want to create my index.ts file, and inside there I'm going to be importing a Prisma client from the Prisma and client. Next up, we have to create an instance of a Prisma client, and I'm going to also create a async function which will be a main function, and here inside this function we are going to be performing all of our operations in a few seconds. But first of all, we have to provide a then and catch if we got some sort of an error, so you want to log that error, and we want to disconnect the Prisma, and also you want to exit out this process. So now it's finally time to add a movie. So I'm going to create a function with the name of create movie, and you can give it any name that you prefer, and inside this function we're going to be using prisma.movie.create function, and then we're going to be specifying our data object. And inside this data object, we are going to be providing a values for our model which we just defined a few seconds ago. So first of all, we have to specify some sort of a title for our movie. So I'm going to provide inception. Then we have to provide the description. You can specify anything that you prefer. Also, we are going to be providing a releasing date, and the releasing date for the inception was 2010. We are going to be also specifying a rating which was 8.8, and genre is sci-fi. So now that we successfully create this function, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to execute this function somewhere. So I'm going to go into my main function, and inside there we are going to be using await and then create movie. So it's going to allow us to create a single movie, which is an inception movie. So this is how we are going to be creating a movie, and this is how our movie will look like. So that was it about how we are going to be adding a single movie. But what if you want to add like multiple movies? So for that, once again, we are going to be creating another function which will allow us to add multiple movies. So I'm going to give it the name of like create multiple movies, and inside there we are going to be calling prisma.movies.create many function in this case. Once again, it's going to take a data, and now in this case it's not going to take it as an object. Instead, it's going to take it as an array, and inside this array we are going to be adding a separate objects, and inside those objects we are going to be providing an information for our model, and then we have to call this function somewhere. So we are going to be once again going into our main function, and we just have to execute our newly created function there. It's going to add a multiple movies to our database. So this is how our function looks like, and this is how we are going to be adding a movies to our database. Now what if you want to fetch all of the movies? So for that, once again, we are going to be creating another function with the name of get movies. Inside there we are going to be using prisma.movies.find many, and it's going to give us all of the movies. So now that we successfully created this function, next we have to call this function inside the main function. So I'm going to use await and then get movies. Now it's going to give us all of the movies which we currently have inside our database. In some situation, we would want to search for a specific movie. So to do that, we are going to be creating another function with the name of get movie by ID, which is also going to take a movie ID, which is a number, and inside this function we are going to be using prisma.movie.find unique, and inside there we are going to be searching for a specific movie. So we will just provide a where clause where the ID is equal to the movie ID, which we are now taking as a parameter, and it's going to give us that specific movie. So once again, we have to call this function inside our main function, and now it's going to give us that specific movie. Now what about updating a movie? So if you want to update the movie, we have to create another function with the name of update movie, which will take a movie ID, updated title and updated description as a parameters. Now inside this function, we are going to be calling our prisma.movie.update function. And here we have to first of all specify which movie we want to update. So I'll just use like where the ID, and the ID is now coming from the movie ID, which is now coming from the perimeter. And then we have to specify the updated data. So I'll specify like the title, and the title is coming from the perimeter, and also description is coming from the perimeter. So now we are going to be updating our movie based on that specific ID, and we want to update the title and description. So that was the actual code. Now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to call this function inside our main function. So now we are going to be using await and then update movie. First of all, we have to specify which movie you want to update. In my case, I'm going to specify the ID of 2, and then what will be the title of your movie. So I'll just give it the title of like new movie, and then finally a description for your movie. Welcome to the final section. So in this one, we are going to be learning about how we can delete a movie. So if you want to delete a movie, first of all, we have to create a delete movie function, which will take movie ID, and based on that specific ID, we are going to be deleting our movie. So now inside this function, we have to call our prisma.movie.delete function, and here we have to specify which movie we want to delete. So where the ID, and ID is now equal to the movie ID, and that is coming from the function parameter. So this is how we are going to be deleting a movie, but now we have to call this function inside our main function. So now we are going to be using await and then delete movie, and then we have to specify the ID, and based on that specific ID is going to delete or destroy the movie.